Hi everyone, I'm Mike O'Connor, editor of Australian Photography, and in partnership with Adobe, we're honoured to have the amazing Julianne Cost here with us today. Julianne has been down under in Australia, which is a real treat. Julianne, welcome. And before we get started, for people who aren't familiar with you, could you just introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Julianne Cost. I work for Adobe. I'm responsible for creating educational and hopefully inspirational content for Lightroom and Photoshop customers around the world. I'm also a photographer, or maybe more an artist with a camera, because I take both straight images and then I also have no issue whatsoever with making composite images. I'm just trying to tell stories and share them with the world.
And so you've been in Australia recently. Where were you? What were you capturing?
We started in Lamington National Park. We were photographing the birds in the rainforest. That was very interesting.
This is in Queensland, by the way.
Yes, sorry. This was the first time for me. I'd never photographed birds before. And of course, you're in a rainforest. It's quite dark. So it was lovely to be able to shoot at a higher ISO this time. I wasn't afraid of it. Usually I've always been one of those, can't go higher than 400, but I was way up there at the highest it would go. From there, we went to Melbourne, where we did a seminar. And then we went up to the Kimberley area, which was fantastic. We went to, and I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but it's Purnululu, I believe, National Park.
I think that's about right, actually. Well done.
Close with with my accent, but that was fantastic, right? There's just amazing landforms up there. We went to, again, I think it's going to be wrong, but Echidna Chasm, right? So it's a slot canyon up there. We went to Pickaninny Creek, where the rock forms are just fantastic. We took a helicopter tour over that area, as well as over the lake, Lake Argyle. And then we went down to Lake Erie, and we stayed in William Creek, and we did some aerials over that area, and that was just absolutely phenomenal. Looking down at that perspective was crazy. So I don't know. I don't think I could pick a favorite, to be honest.
You would have seen a real diverse amount of subject matter, it sounds like. What are some of the challenges with that, with capturing a country with such a wide variety of different environments?
I think just trying to pack light, because you are traveling a lot, and trying to figure out what equipment you want to take. Because we needed clothes for the rainforest, because there's rain, and then it was very hot, and then all of a sudden you're back to being in a helicopter where it's very cold in the morning. So it was just trying to pack a lot of layers, and then having all the equipment that you want for all those different diverse photographs.
Tell me a little bit about how you plan your shoots as well. Obviously, you're working on this trip with a photo tour company, World Photo Adventures, as well. But when it comes to getting prepped and pre-visualizing what you shoot, how do you go about doing that? So
I definitely look online, right? I just so that I know what might be expected. So I research, I go to Google, and then I look for images in that area. And really, I do that because I want to know what's done, so that I can try to do something different, right? So that when I get there and I see that and I go, I've already seen a shot like that. Like, how can I get something a little bit different? I also really try to make sure I know my tools. So if there's a lens that I haven't used, I'll take it out. You might want to, if you're investing in going that far overseas and you're traveling, you probably want to practice with those lenses and just make sure that you're comfortable with them and know how they work. And then also knowing what you can do in post-processing, because there might be some images that you would think, I'm just not going to make that image because it's not exactly right. But if I could dodge that, and I could burn that, and I could remove that little thing right there, then you might take that photograph, and it might end up being, your hero shot, because you could just do a little finessing to make it really kind of your own style, and make it have the feeling that you want it to have.
So you mentioned gear. What did you take on this trip?
I took a 24-120, and then my partner, who I traveled with, he had a wider lens, so that was quite nice. So we would switch off some lenses, and then 70-200. Could have used a longer lens, but that would have been nice, but that's all right. And then a macro.
And what camera body do you use?
Oh, I used two. So I brought two camera bodies because I did know it was going to be very dusty. And I really like to not change my lenses in the field
Sure.
just because I don't want all the dust on them. So I will use, I have a 5DS and then a 5D Mark IV.
Talk to me a little bit about your photo editing on the go. You obviously would have traveled with a laptop.
I did. I was thinking of just going with an iPad, but I knew that I was going to take a lot of photographs and I would need a lot of storage space. So I took my laptop. Um, I take two external drives just in case everything doesn't fit on my laptop. And that way I can also have a backup. And then I, put those in different bags just in case I lose a bag or lose my luggage or lose something gets left behind. So I'll have a backup of that. And I just create a new catalog on my laptop for that trip, and I import all of my images into Lightroom Classic. Doesn't matter if it's Classic or the other Lightroom, because either way, you like the other Lightroom version, that's the desktop version that syncs all the files in the cloud. You don't have to do that right away. Like you can wait and sync your files later, because in some places we didn't have internet. But I was just using Classic because I knew I would be shooting so many images and I needed survey mode. There were just a few features that I still needed in it. So yeah, and then when I come home, I just take my laptop that has the catalog and all the photos, and I have a backup, like I said, on another drive, so I can just plug that drive into my other computer, and I open up my master catalog and I just say import from catalog, and it just imports all of those images and the changes that I've made and the collections that I've made and any virtual copies. And so it's pretty seamless, and it really works for me.
Are you doing selections as you go, or do you wait until the end of your trip to do that?
I make selections as I go, but then I find that, I kind of want to go back through them when I have more time just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And, sometimes for me anyway, when I'm on the road, sometimes images are like difficult to get. And just because they're difficult doesn't mean they're good. And sometimes I'm a little biased, like, oh, that was such a great image because it was so hard to get. And then later you look at it and you're like, actually, no, it's not a great image. This other image that was easier to get is probably actually a more interesting image. So I'm not always really secure about my first edit. I like to give my images a little time and make sure they still stand up in, a month or two.
How many shots do you reckon you captured over the month?
You'll laugh, but probably 20,000.
Yeah, right. I was expecting you to say more, to be honest.
Well, we did so many locations, and aerial for me it's amazing to me how many, when you look back over your images, like just a second or two, because you're flying, it can just change a little bit. And yeah, I probably would be happy with just the first one, but the second one and the third one sometimes just give you a little different view, or the horizon's straighter, or you're looking straight down, and it does make a difference. So I've just learned it's worth it for me to shoot, because when am I going to be able to go back there and do that again?
So lots of people will be planning trips at the moment or about to leave on trips. What's your advice? What maybe if you've got 3 pieces of advice for people who are about to do a photographic trip overseas, what would you say to them?
I would say to do your research, right? So do your research, but at the same time, kind of let go of your expectations while you're there, right? Because the story is going to have to reveal itself. Someone else has documented a different story. You're going to be telling your story. So if you go with all these preconceived notions of what you're going to get, you might be disappointed, whether that's because there aren't any clouds while you're there, or you're not in the right location, whatever it is. I just try to let go of all those expectations and just immerse myself and try to see everything I can while I'm there. Meaning not to see everything, not to go everywhere, but to really be in one location and really look at that location, look really hard. And because I figure if I'm somewhere and I don't get a good photo, it's not the location's fault. It's usually my fault for not actually, seeing what's there, because I think there's a photograph everywhere. I would also say to make sure your gear is in working order, right? Just test everything, test your cards, know how to use it, just practice. Like I mentioned before, go to the zoo if you're going to photograph birds. That would have been really helpful if I'd done that, or go to the park, whatever. And then also keep in the back of your mind, like I usually have a shoot list or just something to remind me, like, hey, did you take any panoramas? Because a lot of the times I get so involved in taking these little close-ups of interesting patterns and shapes that I kind of forget to take the big overall image, you know? So I like to be able to set the story by saying, you know, this is the overall location, and then here's all the little details that I was able to capture while I was there. And that works really well for me because I want to, you know, create something like Creative Cloud Express has this thing called a web page. And so you can actually create a story and put your videos and your photos. And then by doing that, you're not just like putting a bunch of JPEGs somewhere. You're actually able to kind of construct and kind of order all of your images, and it makes it really easy to share because you just have to share a link. So I'm trying to think of treating my entire shoot like that. And sometimes it does help for me to create a shoot list. And then I also just look for images that don't have a sense of scale. I know right now, like other people would disagree. Like they definitely want to put a person in the landscape so that you know the sense of scale. Topic. Yeah, but I think like I love abstracts, and I mean abstracts need to be constructed, right? So when you're looking for an abstract, I'm still looking for compositions that have energy or flow, and I'm trying to use like light and color to bring emotion to that image. And so it's not just like pointing your camera at some water. And that's probably why I photograph a lot too, because if it's ripples in the water, I want to make sure that, you know, I have some to choose from, because they're never the same. They all look different. Yeah,
I think that's something that's challenging about photographing Australia too, is that the sense of space is so vast, and you would have seen this with the aerials, that it's natural to want to give, you know, add a figure to the frame to just give a sense of place and to give it some weight.
Yeah, I do see both sides of it. But sometimes I just want my images to ask questions like, where is that? What is that even of? Like, is that this planet? And then make people think like, well, gosh, you know, where was that taken? And I had no idea something looked like that. I find that kind of fascinating too.
So while you were away in April, Adobe made some updates to Lightroom as well. Are you able to talk a little bit about what some of the headline features are? And have you been able to use them much at all?
Oh, thank goodness it was denoise. I was so happy about that feature, because photographing those birds in that dark rainforest, you know, with those high ISOs, that really, really helped. I was amazed at how much better my images turned out. I mean, and I thought maybe, you know, you would lose definition like in feathers, but I'm just amazed. You know, it's based on AI.
So just to explain, sorry, yeah, it's basically a one-click option to remove noise.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not a difficult thing. It does create a new file, a new DNG file. So it's a raw file, and you have all the magic of editing, you know, your raw file still. And yeah, and there's just one little slider. So, you know, it gives you a good starting point, but if you think it's too much, you can back off. And if you want more noise removed, you can go ahead and add that in. And then, you know, if it gets, sometimes like I would push it a little to make sure that I was getting all the detail in the bird, and maybe the background would go too smooth, but then you can always add back in, you know, your grain, and so it really, really helped me on the trip, definitely. And then there's also the masking. Now that wasn't necessarily just new in April, but we did add some new things and some new presets as well, some of those adaptive presets. But gosh, I mean, being able to select the subject or select an object and make changes to that locally, that is really,
so
really
this
helpful.
Is curves within masks.
Yeah, curves, like all of them. Like just bringing up shadows, any of it. But yes, curves was new most recently. So those curves and masking and denoise really got a lot of use on this trip.
That's great. Well, Julianne, thank you so much. I'm going to share a link in the description below to some more of your work and to your website. So if you want to see more of Julianne's work, you can via those links. Julianne, thank you so much for your time. We feel very privileged to have you visit us in Australia, and hope to see you back here again soon.
Well, thank you so much. I just had such a fantastic time.